Good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar exploring the complicated regime of modern awards and calculating pay, where we'll be answering the most common questions employers raise in these areas. I'm Ray Welling, Editor-in-Chief of Workplace Info, and I'm joined today by Fiona Corbett, National Manager of the Workplace Advice Unit for the New South Wales Business Chamber. Fiona, welcome.
Thanks.
Now, as we get underway, I'd just like to remind you that if you have any technical issues or you'd like to post a question to our panelists, you can do that by typing your query into the chat box in the lower left corner of your screen. We've received quite a few questions in the lead up to this webinar, and we'll get to as many of those questions as we can during the time we have together or as follow-up. I'd like to point out the information provided in this webinar today is general information only, so it does not take into account your own particular work situation or your objectives and needs. Before acting on any information contained in the discussion, you should consider the appropriateness of the information with regard to your own objectives, work, financial situation, and needs. Fiona, maybe you could start us off by giving us a bit of background on modern awards and how they work.
So today I'll be discussing modern awards as they currently stand, and particularly how to determine award coverage, classify, and then how to pay employees. The 4-yearly review of awards is currently in progress. So far, there have not been many decisions handed down. Hearings are likely to continue into 2016. Australian Business Lawyers and Advisors, the Chamber's law firm, appears on behalf of the New South Wales Business Chamber and Australian Business Industrial, and are active in the award review proceedings. Modern awards have now been around for over 5 years, so we're becoming more familiar with how to interpret them. They apply to a number of employees covered by the National Workplace Relations System. Awards are industry or occupation-based and apply to employers and employees who perform work covered by the award. Some awards are both industry and occupation-based, and I'll discuss that further later today. Managers or higher income employees may not be covered by a modern award, even if one applies to the industry they work in. Roles that are traditionally award-free include accountants, marketing managers, lawyers, HR people, PR employees, and IT specialists. There are, however, exceptions, and some of these employees are covered in the Banking, Finance, Insurance, and Professional Employees Awards. When discussing modern awards, I also need to mention the NES, or the National Employment Standards, that set the minimum standards for the majority of employees. While some awards contain provisions particular to the industry or occupation, such as increased notice of termination, for example, in the Educational Services Teachers Award, in most cases it's necessary to refer to the NES for matters such as notice of termination, annual leave, personal carers leave, and parental leave. An industry-based modern award covers the industry the employer predominantly operates in. The classification structure covers the work the employees perform. Examples of industry-based modern awards are the building and construction, aged care, amusements, food, beverage, tobacco, general retail, manufacturing, dry cleaning, banking, finance, insurance, and children's services. An occupational-based award covers a specific occupation that an employee is performing in, such as clerks, nurses, medical practitioners, and commercial sales. There are some awards that are both industry and occupational awards, and examples of these are the Graphic Arts and the Social and Community Services Awards. So what is the role? In a lot of cases, when we hear what the role is and the type of business the role is performed in, we can determine coverage. A popular example is a person doing clerical type work in a manufacturing environment. They would be covered by the Clerk's Private Sector Award, as there's no classifications for clerical people contained within the Manufacturing Award. Another example would be a person doing clerical work in a banking environment. They'd be covered by the Banking, Finance, Insurance Award. To determine difficult coverage, we use our experience and knowledge, records of previous award coverage questions, together with the Fair Work Ombudsman tools. We consider what the employee spends the majority of their time doing. A member can generally determine even a 51 to 49% ratio, and then the employee would be covered by the award with the higher proportion. We're sometimes asked about an employee with 2 contracts of employment. In some circumstances, for distinctly different roles, 2 contracts may be acceptable, such as where an employee is working in a clerical role who does some promotional work on the weekend. Where 2 contracts may not be acceptable is where the 2 roles would fall under the same award, such as an employee working in a childcare centre as a teacher who is also engaged as a cook at the centre under the same award. The arrangement in any case needs to be carefully documented, as issues may arise with regard to termination, redundancy and long service leave. Performing specific tasks may result in higher classifications. There are many examples of these, and one would be in the General Retail Award, where a general shop assistant would be level 1, and an employee providing supervisory assistance and opening and closing premises would be level 3. If the employee is trade qualified, they are paid at the trade qualified rate. Examples would be in the Manufacturing Award, where trade qualified employees would be paid at the C10 rate, and the Building and Construction Award, where they would be paid at the CW3 level. In some cases, an employee has a qualification, such as being a qualified accountant. However, they may be working as an accounts clerk. In this case, they'd be paid under the Clerk's Award for the duties they are performing, without recognition of their accounting qualification. An example where an employee can have higher qualifications that result in a higher wage rate is from the Hair and Beauty Award. Holding a trade qualification or Certificate 3 is paid at level 3, but an employee who holds a Certificate 4 would be paid at level 5. When it comes to experience and length of service in a role, an example would be from the Social Community Services Award, where progression from level 1 pay point 1 to level 1 pay point 2 occurs at the completion of 12 months service for full-time employees. Different rules apply under this award for part-time employees. The Fair Work Commission review the national minimum wage, which is currently $640.90 or $16.87 per hour each year, and make a new national minimum wage and vary awards with effect from the first full pay period on or after the 1st of July each year. The decision for 2015 will probably be handed down during the week of the 1st to the 5th of June. The 2014 increase was 3%. We're not sure at this stage what the increase will be for 2015, but we only have about another month to wait until we can all find out. We ask a number of questions when we're asked what to pay an employee. The award will determine the age at which the employee becomes an adult. In some cases, there are no junior rates, such as in the Building and Construction Award. And in other cases, an adult is someone who is 18 or 21. Where there is no award coverage, junior rates are derived from the Miscellaneous Award. An award-free employee must be paid at the national minimum wage. The modern awards also contain allowances. Building and construction, joinery, manufacturing, plumbing and other traditional trade-based awards have a large number of allowances, some of which apply to both tradespeople and labourers. Awards such as the Professional Employees and the Clerks Awards have fewer allowances, which could relate to when a private vehicle is used, uniforms and first aid allowances. There are 2 different types of allowances, and they are expense allowances, such as the vehicle allowance, which is increased in accordance with CPI. Other allowances are calculated as a percentage of the standard rate. For example, the on-call allowance from the Health Professionals Award. We suggest that allowances are separately indicated on pay slips, so there can be no dispute that they've been paid. So that's in the case where employees are paid over the award rate. So now I'll have a look at apprentices and trainees. So apprenticeships and traineeships are types of formal training arrangements that combine work with study for a qualification. These arrangements have to be registered with an appropriate state or territory training authority. As well as working with and receiving on-the-job training from an employer, apprentices and trainees will have to attend a registered training organisation or RTO, such as a TAFE or trade school. Variations were made to the majority of modern awards as part of the 2-yearly review. These variations increased wages for apprenticeships commencing on or after the 1st of January 2014. There were also a number of changes relating to conditions of employment which apply to all apprentices, whether or not they commenced before January 2015. These include payment for overnight block release travel, accommodation and meal costs in excess of normal travel to work, reimbursement of training fees and prescribed texts for 6 months unless the employee apprentice has unsatisfactory progress. The employer can choose to pay the RTO directly for the employee's or apprentice's fees. The apprentice can't be required to work overtime or shifts which interfere with training, except in an emergency. So these terms were contained in a number of awards, but now they're contained in the majority or even, I could say, all of the awards that apply to apprentices. For trainees, their rates are derived from the National Training Wage Schedule, which is attached to the majority of modern awards. Terms and conditions of the modern award and the NES apply to trainees. There are circumstances where there's no award that applies to an apprentice or trainee, and in that case we refer again to the miscellaneous award as we do for junior employees that don't have award coverage. A full-time trainee is paid for time worked on the job and for approved training. An existing employee who becomes a trainee continues with at least their pre-apprenticeship wage. So that's something to be carefully considered. If you've got an employee who's expressed a desire to become a trainee, they might be paid at quite a high rate. A school-based trainee can be paid 25% loading in lieu of paid leave. So when we're asked a question with regard to wage rates, we ask a lot of questions before we can give an answer. So some of those are, is the employee full-time, part-time or casual? Full-time and part-time employees are generally paid the same rate, although there are some exceptions. One being the Cleaning Services Award, where a part-time employee is paid more than 1/38 of the weekly rate. Casuals are generally paid 25% casual loading. However, the Business Equipment Award has a 20% casual loading. So that's just to mix things up a bit. The date of commencement and length of service in some circumstances will have an impact on pay rates, and I've given some examples about that previously. For payment of wages, a number of the modern awards prescribe when wages should be paid, and I'll look at the Storage Services Award, which is quite prescriptive. The clause states wages must be paid weekly or fortnightly, so there's no option there to pay monthly. Wages must be paid by cash or cheque during working hours or by electronic funds transfer. On termination of employment, wages due to an employee must be paid on the day of termination or forwarded to the employee as soon as reasonably practicable and within 2 working days after the termination. Again, that is quite prescriptive, and a number of awards don't have any rules at all about when wages are to be paid on termination. The professional employees don't mention the payment of wages, so in that case we'd refer to the Fair Work Act, which simply states the wages are to be paid at least monthly and by cash, cheque or EFT. I'm also going to discuss employees paid in accordance with the supported wage system, which is contained in the majority of awards. They are employees who, because of their disability, are eligible for a supported wage. which is assessed on their capacity to perform duties. For the purpose of establishing the percentage of the relevant minimum wage, the productive capacity of the employee will be assessed in accordance with the supported wage system by an approved assessor. After they've consulted with the employer and the employee, and if the employee desires, a union to which the employee is eligible to join. All assessments made under this schedule must be documented in an agreement and retained by the employer as a time and wages record in accordance with the Act. Modern awards stipulate when hours can be worked without penalty. An example is from the Food, Beverage, Tobacco Award, where the spread of hours is from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. These hours can be altered by 1 hour at either end of the spread by agreement between the employer and the majority of employees. The agreement needs to be in place prior to the work being carried out. If an employee works outside these hours, they should be paid at overtime rates, which would be time and a half for the first 3 hours, then double time. Other awards require time and a half for the first 2 hours, then double time. The award will stipulate the minimum engagement, particularly for part-time or casual employees. As an example, the Restaurants Award has a 3-hour minimum for part-time employees and a 2-hour minimum for casual employees. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had a number of questions relating to the storms that have affected coastal New South Wales regions. The types of questions that we've had include: what happens if the business is unable to operate due to flooding or lack of electricity? So employees in this case could be stood down without pay. If the employer and the employee agree, annual leave could be used. The other popular type of question is what happens if the employee can't attend work? So this depends on the circumstances. If for an unexpected emergency, such as where a tree has fallen on a house and an employee had to tend to its removal, they could use their personal leave. Where an employee could not get into work because of flooding or cyclones or any other natural disaster, they could use their leave without pay or annual leave if both parties agree. Again, I'll look, when we're discussing shift workers, at the Food, Beverage, Tobacco Award, which has special provisions for shift workers. Employees in this award working early morning shift receive a penalty of 12.5%. If they're working afternoon or night shift, they receive 15%. And if the shift doesn't continue for 5 successive afternoon or nights, an additional 50%. So that doesn't mean where the employee works the 5 successive afternoon or nights, but rather that the shift runs for those 5 successive afternoon or nights. We're often asked by members about how to be more cost effective when rostering their employees to shifts. We can assist to ensure employees are paid correctly without payment of additional unexpected penalties. Yet, as you can see, there's a fairly big difference between paying a 50% penalty to paying the 12.5%. The award dictates different rules for shift workers in regard to breaks, overtime and penalty rates. As an example, the Pharmaceutical Award allows for 2 10-minute rest breaks and 1 crib break of 20 minutes, and they're all counted as time worked. Overtime is calculated at 150% for the first 3 hours rather than 2 hours for day workers before double time is paid. A shift worker under the Clerks Award, whose ordinary working period includes a Saturday, Sunday or public holiday as an ordinary working day, is paid at time and a half, so less than the 250% generally paid for work on a public holiday. A number of awards, including the Manufacturing Award, have rules regarding whether a major portion of the shift is performed on a Sunday or public holiday. In this case, the payment is double time for the whole shift for a continuous shift worker, A shift worker other than a continuous shift worker is paid for all time worked on a Sunday at double time and on a public holiday at double time and a half. Penalty rates. They apply to employees that are award covered, as the terms and conditions for penalty rates are derived from awards. During April, with the Easter and Anzac Day public holidays, we had a large number of calls regarding penalty rates. Saturday is often paid at 125%, Sunday 200%, and a public holiday 250%. The Waste Management Award requires triple time payment for permanent employees and 325% for casuals on Good Friday and Christmas Day. So the manner in which the penalty rate is applied is determined by the award. And again, we'd need to check on an award by award basis to determine what the penalties are for each of those Saturday, Sunday and public holidays. With regard to overtime, this should always be approved prior to the employee working additional hours. So it's really not up to the employee to decide that they'll work overtime. It should be approved by management. For full-time or part-time employees, overtime is generally calculated on the base rate. For casuals, there are 3 different ways overtime is calculated, and I'll go through those. If the casual loading is all-purpose, such as in the manufacturing and food, beverage, tobacco awards, overtime is calculated on the casually loaded rate. So that results in a higher rate. In some modern awards, the casual loading is added after applying time and a half or double time, such as in the Clerks, Nursery Award and the Children's Services Award. In other modern awards, the casual loading is not used at all in the calculation. Some modern awards do not require overtime to be paid to casuals, such as in the General Retail, Horticulture, Hospitality, Restaurant and Fast Food Awards. For shift workers, the shift loading is dropped and overtime is applied to the base rate. Superannuation is not paid on overtime, as it is not ordinary time earnings. Superannuation as a topic is very broad and would need to be discussed separately. So for public holidays, there's a number of gazetted national and state public holidays. The NES specifies 8 public holidays, and they are the 1st and the 26th of January, Good Friday and Easter Monday, Anzac Day, Queen's Birthday, which is observed on a date decided by the state, and the 25th and 26th of December. The NES provides for other days or part days declared under a state law for the state or region. The state can substitute any of these days or part days. Also, an award can provide for agreed substitution of any of these dates. An employee is entitled to be absent from work on a public holiday unless the employer requests the employee to work. The employee can refuse that request to work. Reasons for refusal to work would be for personal circumstances, including family responsibilities. If an award-covered employee works, they are entitled to be paid at public holiday penalty rates. An award-free employee would be, the rates for them working on a public holiday would be something to be negotiated between the employer and the employee, but there's no penalty automatically obliged to be paid to an award-free employee. Permanent employees who are absent on a public holiday are entitled to receive payment for ordinary hours that the employee would have worked at the employee's base rate of pay. If the employee doesn't have ordinary hours of work on a public holiday, they're not entitled to payment. So as an example, where a part-time employee works Tuesday to Friday, they're not therefore entitled to be paid for not working on a public holiday that falls on a Monday. Generally, part-time employees' hours under the majority of modern awards should be fixed. If a part-time employee's hours are not fixed, it's complicated to determine whether the employee is entitled to payment for the public holiday. A full-time employee who works Monday to Friday does not derive a benefit from a public holiday that falls on a Saturday or Sunday. So if we look at Easter in New South Wales, both the Saturday and Sunday are public holidays together with the Friday and Monday. In that case, a Monday to Friday worker doesn't get the benefit for Easter Saturday and Easter Sunday. A casual employee is not entitled to payment for a public holiday unless they work on that day. So for full chamber members, you can view your awards on the New South Wales Business Chamber website. There's also pay and allowance summaries for the awards that you subscribe to. A number of them have rates calculated for Saturdays, Sundays, public holidays, shift work and overtime. So for specific award questions, call the advice line. We're there to help and I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for that, Fiona. Yes, as you said, we'll spend a few minutes going through some of the questions that were sent through by registrants at the time of registration, and we've also had a few that have come in during the webinar today. One thing I will point out is we actually had quite a large number of questions for this particular webinar, but in many cases there's really not enough information to be able to answer the question properly. So if you do want an answer to your question, you might want to consider the services of the New South Wales Advice Line, if you want some follow-up information. But we do have a few questions we can get through. So first off, we've got one. Somebody's asked, when do casuals start earning overtime? And in their case, they're talking about the Food, Beverage and Tobacco Industries Award.
Okay, so a casual would be entitled to overtime if they work in excess of 38 hours a week, if they work outside of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So the ordinary hours are to be set by the employer under this award. The award does allow for 12-hour shifts by agreement. So really there's two definite ways under this award: in excess of 38 hours and outside of the 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. But the ordinary hours need to be set.
Right. Okay. All right. Another question. What are an employer's obligations relating to maternity leave? And in this particular case, we're talking about someone who's been with the organization for 3 years. Okay, so this isn't necessarily the same topic, but I can certainly answer the question. So an employee with 12 months service has an entitlement to 12 months of unpaid leave. During that period, they can apply through Centrelink for paid parental leave. If they're successful in receiving that payment, the payment will be passed on to the employer, at which time, after receiving that payment, the employer will pass that on in their normal pay cycle to the employee. All right. All right, another one. Someone asks, how do you handle payment for a staff member that works 2 weeks at 4 days per week and then 2 days per week for 2 weeks? The circumstances are they're paid fortnightly and days of work sometimes change. Yeah. So they ask, how do you know how many days to pay annual leave or personal leave when the roster is continually changing? Yep. So most awards provide for the averaging of hours. The entitlements accrue depending on the number of ordinary hours worked in
a week or in a fortnight. So presuming, we'd have to have a look at the award that is being discussed, but presuming that the award does allow for averaging of hours, and mostly they do, the entitlement you'd add the hours up and you'd work out from the number of hours worked what the entitlement is for both of those forms of leave, annual leave and personal leave.
Right. So the answer is it's a manual job.
No. Most payroll systems should be able to handle it. If you put in the number of hours, the number of ordinary hours, the payroll system would be able to calculate the entitlements. So I mentioned before that entitlements don't accrue on overtime; they only accrue on ordinary hours.
Right. Okay. Here's one. Someone's asking, what's the public holiday pay rate when it's on a Saturday, and the employee would normally get a penalty rate for working Saturday anyway?
Okay.
In this particular case, they're talking about a hairdresser.
Yeah.
So whatever the relevant award is for that.
Yeah. So that's hairdresser, hair and beauty employees fall under the hair and beauty industry award. There's a 33% loading for working on a Saturday. If the Saturday was a public holiday, so we had 2 of those in April with Anzac Day and also Easter Saturday in New South Wales. In that case, they're paid the public holiday penalty rate rather than the Saturday penalty. So the 33% penalty rate is dropped and the public holiday penalty rate is paid instead.
Right, so they default to whatever one is higher.
Yeah, which will be, it's probably 250%. I'd have to check the award specifically, but generally speaking, it's 250% for work on a public holiday.
Okay. All right, someone else had a question about pre-modern award entitlements around redundancy.
Yeah. So the requirement to refer back to pre-modern awards to determine redundancy payments came to an end at the end of 2014. So from 2015 onwards, what we refer to when we're determining redundancy payments is the National Employment Standards.
And then someone else is asking about, I think this is a question about ordinary hours. They said, is clerical work is a week 38 hours, 38 hours or 40 hours?
Yeah. So all of the awards are 38 hours per week. The NES states a maximum of 38 ordinary hours per week to be worked.
Someone else sent in a question. They ask, what is the policy on wages classification if an employee has been casual for more than 5 years working as a clerk? Then they said, should they be transferred to permanent part-time?
Yeah. So what we would be asking to be able to answer that question is, does the employee work the same days and the same number of hours each week? So are they a regular and systematic casual? If the answer is yes, we would suggest that they convert them, or at least offer that they convert to permanent part-time. If their hours vary a lot, we would then suggest that they remain as a casual. A number of awards, and I need to check the Clerks Award specifically, but a number of awards contain casual conversion clauses. So what that means is that after 6 months, it's generally 6 months, employment, they should be offered permanent employment. But as I said, that does, it is based around whether their hours are regular and systematic.
Now, just looking through the other questions that have come through during the webinar, Can you see anything in there? You want to give a quick scroll through and see whether there's something that you can answer quickly?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. I can see one regarding SHAD's rates. SHAD's rates are affected by the ERO, and the ERO is going to have an effect, I believe, until 2020. So we're still using the pre-reform rates, the ERO, with the ERO, and the modern award rates. So it's a very complicated formula to determine those rates. We have calculated those for New South Wales, and they're available on our website to members that subscribe to that award. Oh, okay. I can see one regarding paid father's leave. So a dad or partner is entitled to apply for what's called dad and partner pay. Again, that's paid. That's paid directly to the dad or partner through Centrelink. The requirement is that the employee is on leave without pay from the employer to be able to access that dad and partner pay, which is paid for 2 weeks at the national minimum wage.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, look, I think that that brings us to the end of our discussion. Thanks very much, Fiona, for your time, for answering all those general questions that people have, and also many of the specific ones that they've sent through. Now, just to keep in mind that the advice line that's run by Fiona and her team is one of the services offered by the New South Wales Business Chamber for employers. If you have a look at the Chamber's website at nswbc.com.au, you'll be able to find out more information about the Chamber and its business services. Meanwhile, we hope you found today's session useful. Please feel free to drop us a line at editor@workplaceinfo.com.au if you have any follow-up questions. And make sure you log on to Workplace Info and Workplace OHS for the latest information on compliance and best practices for HR, IR, and work safety professionals. If you want to revisit some of today's presentation, an archive will be published on our YouTube channel, which you can watch and listen to at your leisure. The URL will be included in our follow-up correspondence. Keep an eye on your email info inbox for info on our upcoming webinars, which include how to deal with an increasingly diverse workplace, which will be held in a couple of weeks, and then we'll be discussing enterprise agreements in June.